Hello, welcome to the fourth trimester village. My name is Eileen, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what fourth trimester Arizona is. We are a grassroots Arizona 501c3 established in 2018. We were formed as a collaboration of health professionals, educators, local organizations, parents, and families who support one another during their transition to parenthood. So we have villages, and we have 6 now every month, different areas of the state, but you're welcome to all of them. 2 of them have specific populations. Go to our Facebook page and or our website to find out more. We have a conference that we finished in March, and we also have an ecosystem that is specifically to, we created an initiative for all who care about pregnant people, new mothers, and their babies. So our idea is to gather monthly, providing new parents with a community of other new parents and access to workshops, wellness services, and bonding activities. So right now, most of them are convenient and they are on Facebook Live. And so check to see if some are meeting in person, if you would like to join them to meet in person. Okay. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for our Tucson village. And I am just so honored to have someone who has so much knowledge about nutrition and feeding the postpartum body. That's what we are calling this village. Adia Jamille is a multidisciplinary creator, an all-inclusive doula, lactation consultant, educator, gardener, and herbalist. She will share with us her love of vegetables, herbs, recipes, and resources to develop the body and mind for an optimal health during the 4th trimester. Nutritional realignment is offered by Adia to create an updated relationship with food in support of your health goals. Discussions of accessible ways to improve eating habits and foods that may support your current health needs will be part of our village. Adia's endeavors work towards the common goal of reclamation and restitution, reclaiming skills, practices, and knowledge that were lost due to being a descendant of enslaved Africans and putting them into common practice. Adia was born in Idaho. She lived in California and Kansas before coming to Arizona. She currently lives in Tucson with her husband and 2 children. She provides produce for sale at events around Tucson, and you can find her at Adia Jamille or www.adiajamille.com. We are so lucky to have her, and I am so honored to turn it over to Adia for our presentation.
Hi, everyone. So I was thinking I needed to introduce myself, but I guess not. So I guess it's okay. I will just give a little bit of background of how I became a doula. So as Eileen shared, I have 2 children. I've had 3 pregnancies. They were all very, very different. The first one was pretty ideal, but the delivery was not ideal. I had to be induced. Well, I didn't have to be induced. I was a new mom. I didn't know what I could and couldn't do. And so I was induced. And so delivery was very prolonged and it was very painful. The second pregnancy, I developed very, very, very severe preeclampsia. And I was hospitalized for about a week and a half before we had to deliver our baby via emergency C-section at 26 weeks. He then had a NICU stay for 6.5 weeks before he transitioned because his body was just tired. And then after that, we had our rainbow baby. She will be turning 3 in July. And that pregnancy was really great, but I still had a lot of trauma from the middle pregnancy. And so all of these things came together. And I noticed a lot of people asking me for advice and coming to me for support during their own pregnancy and lactation journeys. And then I didn't even know what a doula was until a few years ago. And then I was like, oh, that's basically what I'm doing. And then right around when I had my third baby, that's when I started, right before, that's when I started working on, all the trainings and everything so I could officially become a doula, even though it was something I'd been doing before. I do want to just excuse my background. This is my workspace. It's kind of a mess right now. I don't know how to change the background so you can't see it. So just, this is my life. Anyways, so what happened is that I noticed that as a family, I would say not as a family, my husband and I, we were feeling tired, or he has a lot of intestinal issues. And I was like, I think it's about our diet. I think that we are eating the wrong foods for our bodies. He is indigenous from Mexico, and I, my ancestors are from Africa, West Africa specifically. And Europe. My mother is white. But I was like, I don't do dairy. I don't do a lot of bread. It just makes me feel really tired. So growing up, my mom always had lots of plants. And she wasn't necessarily an herbalist beyond, if I had a headache, let's put peppermint in our nose. But that was basically the foundation of plants can heal. So I started looking into what my ancestors would have had. And I started with enslaved ancestors. And a lot of times people think, oh, soul food, fatty, blah, 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 which is not actually true. A lot of enslaved Africans were eating from their own gardens that they were growing, right? So they were having heavy vegetable based diets with whatever animal parts they could find. And so that's where soul food came from. Of course, over the years, it's morphed and changed and everything. But that is the basis. So we started shifting towards, we are not vegan, but a more plant-based diet where we incorporate more vegetables and more fruits and more specifically ancestral foods. So for my husband, it was more corn and tomatoes and peppers, of course. And then for me, it was more greens and like sweet potatoes and okra. And as we started shifting, we noticed we were feeling a lot better. And then we were like, well, let's try to grow, but we rent, we don't own our home. So we would start gardens and then we would have to move for whatever reason. So then I was like, I don't want to do it. Then we were lucky enough to come to Tucson, where we found there a community garden where we were able to grow for free. And we got a very small, it's not very small, it's bigger than most people have. It was a 4 by 20 foot plot. But now we have grown to, I think it's 25 by 100 feet plot. And so our primary focus is ancestral food. So we grow lots of okra. This year we're doing black Aztec corn. We do lots of beans, and I was able to find some African seeds, West African seeds. So we're gonna have like a goosey melon and Efo, which is a Efo shoko, which is a West African. It's kind of like amaranth, and so that's been our focus, is just switching that. And my son, who is 13, his favorite is one of those West African foods. It's called bitterball. I think people here call it green eggplant. It looks like a little, very tiny pumpkin, and it's very bitter. Apparently, in Nigeria, the hardcore people, this is what I was told, they will eat it just raw. I cannot do that, but my son really, really loves it. So whenever I say like, what celebratory food do you want? He says he wants bitterball, which makes me really happy, because that's something he can only get from me. So anyway, so in my doula training, I made sure to focus on Black and Indigenous people of color led trainings, so that I could gain this knowledge that I was trying to figure out on my own, and specifically herbalism. So if you are in the like thinking, oh, I want to become a doula, my advice would be to learn from people who do pregnancy and postpartum related herbalism classes. And the reason is because they not only talk about the plants, and they not only talk about pregnancy or the postpartum period, but they talk about how those two interact, which I think is something a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention to. To me, all the medicine is in the plants. And you'd be surprised. I grew cotton just on a whim to connect. And I learned how it's still used in contemporary labor, like labor and delivery. Cotton root is used to help contractions and regulate contractions and things like that. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. It's mostly, I think, with midwives, although I think that there are like pharmaceuticals that are made with this root, which is why it's not readily accessible. But so I think that it's very important that we start learning how all those things interact, because when we can start with just how we're treating our body, it'll help all of these transitions go a little bit better. I think that's part of why a lot of us struggle through healing, through pregnancy, through postpartum, all that stuff, is because we live in a society that isn't really set up to support us during those time periods. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, just how to take care of our bodies and how to access the foods in order to do that. So now let me share my screen. How did I do this? I just did it last. Sorry, hold on. How did I do it? I had it a second ago when we tested it. Sorry.
Try again and try just selecting that window. Sometimes it'll give you like your whole screen, and then sometimes it'll give you just the window.
Oh, maybe this one. Here we go. That's what I want. Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right. I got it. Sorry. Nerves.
Good job. Yep. Everybody does
it. So here is like our little table of contents. What I'm going to talk about. When we want to start taking care of the body, what you need to consider as somebody who is either postpartum or caring for somebody who's postpartum, because some people are taking care of themselves out there. And I'm not going to go over everything that happens to the body, but I'm going to just cover a couple of main things that I have experienced or seen people experience, and foods that can help support those issues. The role of community, those around us who are helping us, and how to get access to food. And then just some resources that have been recommended to me or that I like. So first, to me, all of it is, the reason why I'm full spectrum is because the whole process, you can't be like, oh, I'm going to prepare for pregnancy, and then once you're pregnant, be like, okay, now I don't have to do anything. Or, oh, I'm going to take care of my postpartum body, but like you didn't do anything to get through the pregnancy with your health and mental health intact, right? So really, if you are planning a pregnancy, obviously if it's an unexpected pregnancy, which those happen, you can't do this. But if you're planning to become pregnant, you should start caring for your body from the moment you're like, I think I want to have a baby. And that just means starting to think about what you're eating and how you're eating, and what the foods you're eating are gonna do to help that process. For instance, like if you're pregnant, you want to start eating foods that will help you have a lot of moisture in your body so that it'll help slide that baby out. So like okra, and if you're in Arizona, nopal, like those are really good things that you can eat that will help that transition from pregnancy during delivery. So when you're considering how you're going to support someone or yourself, you need to consider what is the health of this person before, during, and after pregnancy, right? When I was not pregnant, whenever I'm not pregnant, I'm super healthy. I was very active, and I, was playing a lot of sports and just doing a lot of stuff, and I didn't have any health complications. But my second pregnancy, well, I should say I'm very short, so pregnancy is very uncomfortable for me. I'm barely over 5 foot. So when I get pregnant, I just go outward, and it makes walking very hard. Being in Arizona, I swell up because it's hot. And so my body changes a lot. And actually, it's part of what makes pregnancy not super enjoyable for me. But my second pregnancy, because of the preeclampsia, I had a lot of issues. I had anemia. I had very high blood pressure to the point where they were worried I was going to have seizures or stroke while I was in the emergency room waiting to deliver. So these are things that you need to think about, because while a lot of the issues that come during pregnancy will go away postpartum, how you treat the body afterwards will help that transition, and those symptoms dissipate quicker. So for me, when I found out that I had high blood pressure and anemia, I was eating foods that were iron rich to help me be able to undo the anemia. And I was eating foods that were helping lower my blood pressure naturally. I was still on medication because it was so high, but by my 6-week check, I was able to be removed from I didn't have to take the medication anymore. And since then, I've maintained it through diet and exercise. The other thing you need to consider is culture. There are a lot of cultures that do not encourage things like leaving the house for 40 days. There are cultures that do not encourage eating cold foods for the first 40 days after you have a baby. And part of the reason is because when you have a baby, it basically is like an opening ceremony. It opens your whole body, right? You have all your pores are open. That's why you're sweating. You're possibly have wounds, depending on if there's tearing or not. I mean, you're opening as you're, either by C-section or by vaginal delivery to get this baby out. And so when you're opening up your whole body, you have to be careful what you put in so that all those things can close back up. And one of the people I follow, she says, she's indigenous and Mexican, but she says that in their culture, they believe that when you are eating cold foods and things like that, you invite the spirit of cold in to your body, which is so interesting to me. And I didn't intend to talk about this, but it's interesting to me because when you think about women or, people who are assigned female at birth, they tend to be colder than men. And I wish I was a scientist so I could see if that's something that presents more post having babies, or if that's something that is just natural, because I feel like that's why when women and people start menopause, they start getting hot because all of those things are closing back up. That's just a tangent. I don't know. But I just think it's very interesting, and that's something to consider if you're supporting somebody, just what kind of foods they are going to want in their bodies. The next thing to consider is baby feeding plans. If they're going to be nursing, their diet needs to be supportive to that. If they're not going to be nursing, their diet needs to still be supportive of postpartum care. Also, when I say postpartum, I do want to acknowledge that postpartum to me includes people who are delivering babies and taking them home, but also people who might have miscarriage or infant loss. That body still went through a pregnancy and still needs to be cared for when that pregnancy is over. And especially if it was a loss, because now there's a whole other component of grief that needs to be addressed. So when I say postpartum, just know that includes not just people with babies. Anyway, so if you're planning to nurse, you need to be making sure that your diet and all that is conducive to that. And then the other thing to consider is what kind of support system, because it's very easy to say, well, when you have a baby and you're nursing or you're doing this and that, you need to eat healthy. But if they're a single parent, or if they have a partner that's not very helpful, or if they don't have a community that's helpful, the ability to access healthy food and prepare it and eat it really is going to change, because they are not being supported in ways that allows them to do that. So this is a short list of postpartum health issues that happen, and it's not in any way complete. But these are just some things to think about. You can develop allergies, and this can be skin allergies, food allergies, seasonal allergies, any kinds of things like that. Postpartum thyroid issues, changes in your mental health, night sweats, glucose swings, hemorrhoids and or constipation, anemia, high blood pressure, hemorrhaging, urinary tract infection, postnatal depletion. I just want to say very quickly, if something to consider is to have somebody who will handle your placenta postpartum. It could be for whatever you want. It doesn't even matter. Like, you can bury it, you can encapsulate, you don't have to encapsulate, you don't have to do anything with it, but just to have somebody who looks at your placenta after you deliver, because they will notice if there is any kind of abnormalities or if it did not come out completely. I had a friend who a piece of her placenta stayed inside, and she hemorrhaged really horribly, and they ended up doing an emergency hysterectomy. So having somebody who's processing that placenta in whatever way, for me, I had a client, she doesn't want to encapsulate, and she comes from a culture where they bury it. So I dehydrated it for her and powdered it so that they could, when they decided what to do with it, they could do what they wanted. But having somebody look at it will allow them to know, and that will also potentially save your life, because you can hemorrhage up to 2 weeks later. So being conscious of that is important. So a lot of these need to be diagnosed by your care provider, right? If you are feeling like you're having just a lot of these different symptoms, right? Anxiety, bloating, digestive issues, fatigue, hair loss, and like any number of these, they all can present and be different things. And a lot of things look like one thing, but they're another thing, and they all look very similar. So when you start seeing or feeling like something is not quite right, it's important that you are seeing somebody who can diagnose that, yes, this is normal, or no, we need to look further, so that you know what you're actually treating, right? Because you might think, oh, I just need to eat some more food because I'm tired, or I need to eat more iron food. And really it's something else. Always lots of water. I recently had a kind of an epiphany about my relationship to water. I have always been somebody who has had a lot of water around me. I like to have my water bottle, as long as I can remember. I've always had a large water bottle with me at all times. And I said to my husband, I was like, I don't know how people don't drink water all day. Like, I'm always thirsty. And he's like, you just don't. And I was like, but that doesn't make sense to me. Like, aren't you just thirsty? And I was taking this class, and we were talking about what is your relationship to water. And they also talked about this experiment that was done about the different reactions that water has to how it's spoken to. And of course, when you said kind words or play lovely music, it made these really beautiful patterns and like snowflake type things. And when it heard harsh words, it had much more, like, I guess, aggressive patterns that were showing up. And so I realized, I think part of the reason why I crave water so much is because I need that goodness and kindness to enter my body that I give to other people. So this is something that you should consider, that when your body is craving and needing water, is that it's needing more kindness to enter and more goodness. The next step is creating a balanced and appropriate diet. And I say appropriate because I know there's a lot of diets that people want to follow because they want to lose weight or because they are conscious to how our agricultural and farming industries process our food or any number of things. But what is actually more appropriate is what I, in my personal belief, is what is appropriate for you culturally, right? So if you come from a culture where you eat plants and meat, you should probably be eating plants and meat. And there's a reason for that. And if you come from a culture where fish is heavy based, then you should be eating lots of fish. And my way of thinking of it is that if I live in the desert, which I do, the plants that grow here are specifically designed to care for my body here. There's a reason why we have cacti here. There's a reason why we can grow corn and bean and watermelons, right? These are foods that hold a lot of water. These are foods that are going to provide what our body needs to combat the heat and the sun and the drought that comes. The other really, really important thing is always rest. A lot of times we are not allowed to rest when we have a baby. We're supposed to get up. If you have more kids, you're taking care of these other kids. If you have a job, you may or may not have maternity leave. But rest is going to be essential into caring for your body and allowing the food that you put into it to do what it's supposed to do. And then movement that supports your mental health and physical recovery. It's not ideal to start working out right away. Your body is all out of whack. Everything is shifted and needs time to get back into place. And so starting to just jump really heavy into exercise, strenuous exercise, can sometimes prolong that. And also it can just be hard on you emotionally if you feel like you're doing all this work and then it's not producing the results you want. But, I also know that as an active person, being able to be 100% in my body again without it being controlled by pregnancy is also important. So that's, having gentle movements. There's a lot of folks who do like postpartum yoga and postpartum fitness classes that you can look into that will help you. And of course, for everybody, it's going to be different. And for me, it's never about weight loss. The weight will come off when the weight is going to come off. But that first couple months, that's not the goal. The goal is to recover, to heal, especially, if you've had a C-section, you've had a major surgery, if you've had any kind of tearing, you've had, you're extremely sore. So it's really important that you take the time to just allow your body to do what you need it to do. And I believe that this will promote bonding between yourself and your baby because you're no longer fighting with your baby. If you're allowing yourself, you're no longer fighting with your pregnancy and yourself to feel, quote unquote normal. You're allowing that time to just marvel at what you just did, right? Because it is a miracle. And I think when people use that term, they don't really understand how much of a miracle it really is. Besides the it's the percentage chance of you getting pregnant is this much, blah, blah, blah. Like, not even just because of that. The fact that we survive it is the miracle. So allow yourself to just marvel and revel in that. Allow people you're caring for the time to do that. A lot of cultures will not even let a postpartum parent do anything. They have to sit, they have to rest, and they feed them soups and they feed them food, and they don't even really let them take care of the baby. They'll bring the baby to nurse. Oops, sorry. They'll bring the baby to nurse and then, hold on a second. They'll bring the baby to nurse and then they take the baby away. So, gosh, I can't get to the thing to close it. How do I move this? There we go. So that's my goal, is that we can get back to parents being able to just rest and be catered to. We have a long way to go there. So knowing that a lot of parents can experience things like anemia, high blood pressure if they experience things like preeclampsia or things like that, or digestion issues, and then just if they want to nurse, right? Especially now we see what's going on with the formula. I have a lot of feelings about formula and how it was marketed and how we even got to this point. But I would just say that if you are pregnant, if you just had a baby and you're concerned about formula, and you're even concerned because you're like, maybe I don't want to breastfeed, just talk to somebody, a lactation consultant, who can explain and support you through whatever part of that, whichever decision you go through. Because I find that a lot of people, their fears come from a place of being uninformed. And that's a generational issue. When I started having kids, my grandmother, she was asking me, she still asks me, right? Because I'm still nursing my toddler. She still asked me lots of questions because she was raising my mother when formula was really, 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 really starting out and really big. And so she literally never, ever breastfed or even considered breastfeeding my mother. And so she has no idea about anything. And that is actually the case for a lot of us, or a lot of our parents. And if you're a person of color, that history is even more complicated by just how Black folks in America were treated postpartum. We were not allowed to nurse our babies, and often were separated from babies, or we had to be wet nurses. And so a lot of people have complicated feelings about nursing. And so it's really important that if you are pregnant, considering being pregnant, or just postpartum, to just talk to a lactation consultant so you can get any questions, concerns answered. And it doesn't mean that you're going to change your mind, but it might help you address whatever your personal history is with lactation. And that, when I say that, I mean your family history. I don't know. I just always grew up knowing that you breastfeed, probably because that's what my mom did. And I know the difference between my mom's health and my own health. And I felt like that was the main catalyst, is that I was breastfed. And then I look at my children and they don't really have any health issues. So anyways, that's my little plug for lactation, because it's really important to me. So if you have blood issues, you're going to want to eat foods that are going to support your blood. That's beets, dark leafy greens, legumes, beans and lentils, all that stuff. Molasses is really good. Tomato products, and that's cans, paste, sauces, any of that stuff. Red meat, organ meats, eggs, pumpkin seeds, dark chocolate. And again, this list is not exhaustive. This is what I could fit on the slide. And depending on your own personal dietary needs, you're not going to eat some of these things. If you are nursing or plan to nurse, you're going to want to eat oats. And buckwheat is one of my favorite things. It is not actually wheat, it's a seed. And so it is gluten-free. And it's got a nice nutty flavor. Whenever I make granola, we add buckwheat in there. You can make hot cereals with it and bake with it, all kinds of stuff. I'm actually considering writing I make little mini cookbooks, and I'm considering doing one for buckwheat because I love it so much, but I don't think people really utilize it. Okra, sweet potatoes, nuts and seeds, hibiscus, brewer's yeast, molasses, garlic, and leafy greens. That's something like if you have an herbalist doula and you are asking sometimes for help with your milk, they might tell you to drink a beer really quick, because of the yeast and the hops in there help. Oh my gosh, sorry. Every time I get an email, it wants to open. it'll help your milk come out quick. If you have blood pressure issues, which is what got me started with my blood pressure, citrus fruits, fatty fish, pistachios, and unsalted nuts. Obviously you want unsalted because your blood pressure is already high. You don't want to increase it. Beets, spinach, amaranth, and whole grains, berries, broccoli, and kiwi. I didn't add that. Those are all things that can help you. And then if you have digestive issues, broths. When I say broths, I'm specifically talking about like bone broths, but you can make very nutritive broths that don't have any animal products in it. You just need to make sure you're adding, mushrooms and things like that are going to replace that. And also the thing with bone broth is that it adds collagen, which is going to be good for your skin and hair, but also it helps, the gelatin and the collagen help with passing whatever you need to pass. Teas and kombucha. The fun thing with teas is that you could say I have all these issues and then make your own tea, which is what I started doing. I make a lot of teas for my family for different things. And you will find that a lot of the things that you need for one issue will cover multitude of issues, right? Because plants are not, oh, I only take care of this one issue. The thing about plants is that when you learn more and more about the food that you're eating, they are actually all working together to heal and keep our bodies functioning the way they need to function. Again, legumes, beans, and lentils, etc. Brown rice specifically, that will help you if you're constipated and things like that. And bananas help with constipation and diarrhea. So that's a twofer. Yogurt and kefir, I don't know if I'm saying that right. And then fruits and vegetables, of course. The goal is just to, oh, and I didn't put this slide on here, but if you're having mood or mental health issues, foods with a lot of B12 will be helpful with that. You can make teas with herbs that will help lift and support that. I'm not saying it will take it away, but it can help ease some of those symptoms and issues. But yeah, so if you look, the common denominator is going to be dark leafy greens. It's going to be things like beets. It's going to be clean meats, nuts and seeds. Like these are all things. This is why we say we need to have that balanced diet, right? Because it's not supposed to be a diet filled with bread and dairy and even too much meat. My feeling about meat is that we are supposed to eat meat, but not in the quantities in which we consume it. Meat is something that is supposed to fill our bellies, specifically during cold seasons, right? Because this is a time when, before, when we didn't have access to a lot of fresh vegetables, right? There's not a lot growing if it's snowing outside. So meat is something that you can eat and it'll sit in your belly and keep you full, and takes longer to digest than a berry, right? So when we're eating our meats and stuff, we need to be mindful that we probably should not be eating it every meal just because it's going to make you feel heavy. That might be part of what's going to back you up, right? So having broth is a good way to get the benefits of meat without having the actual meat in your belly. And then of course, when it's cold, so this is something interesting too, when discussing about hot and cold foods. There's a lot of foods that come in the fall and winter. In general, let me back up. In general, foods kind of tell you what they're for. So like walnuts are shaped like a brain, right? Because they're good for your brain. Kidney beans are good for your kidneys because they're shaped like your kidney. Dark red vegetables and fruits are good for blood because they're red. And in the winter, fall and winter, a lot of vegetables come up that are orange or red. So squash, sweet potatoes, etc. Those are things that are considered warming foods. And those are the kinds of foods that a lot of people will say are good to have postpartum because they help to, they're not cold foods, right? They're not going to introduce cold into your body. And they're going to help you close up all those blood vessels. They're going to help you close up all those wounds. They're going to help you just put your body back in everything in your body back in places where it needs to go. So if you're trying to decide what does this food do? How will this help me? Looking at the color will be indicative of what the color, and sometimes the shape will be indicative of how it helps. Any questions? All right. So just some other tips. Balance. I think that one of our main issues here in the United States is that we don't balance. I think a lot of people do a lot of different diets and they don't balance well. A lot of we over harvest things. For instance, like quinoa. There was a time when everybody was eating quinoa, but then that makes it for the people who that's their ancestral foods, their cultural foods, their main staple. It makes it hard for them to have access to that, right? The key is not to be like, oh, I want to be healthy, so I'm only going to eat XYZ. Saying you're only going to eat like a salad is not healthy. Saying you're only going to eat meat is not healthy. Saying you're only going to eat fruit is not healthy. I think that there are some benefits to increasing fruit intake, increasing whole grain intake, but just targeting specific foods is not going to be what your body wants or needs. And also acknowledging I don't like dairy. I have never that's not true. I stopped liking dairy when I was 10. So I don't eat any dairy. I don't eat cheese. I don't eat yogurt. I don't even eat vegan cheese or yogurt. I don't like the smell. I don't like the way it looks. I don't want anything to do with it. So that is something that I offset in other ways with different foods, the things that I would get from dairy. I would say avoid any kind of diet that intentionally limits, right? Anything that's telling you, oh, don't eat potatoes, right? Because potatoes have a place. Potatoes are healthy. I think that the only foods you should avoid are foods that make you sick, that are going to cause injury to your body. Otherwise, having them in the right proportions is going to be good for your body. And I think variety is good, just in general. I personally get bored if I eat the same flavors over and over again. So just having different things on hand is going to just make eating in general a lot more fun, right? Because it's like, ooh, what do I get to eat today? Versus, oh, I got to eat the same thing that I always eat. Always, well, as much as possible, you're going to want to try to avoid processed foods. And this goes also for canned foods. I had a friend, he had gotten, he did something with his teeth. I can't remember what it was, but he couldn't eat solid food. So he was eating a lot of canned soups. And then all of a sudden he was feeling really sick. He goes in and they're like, your sodium levels are off the chart. And it's because canned foods have tons of salt in order to preserve them. So we might think sometimes that something is healthy because it says it's organic or it says it's this, that, and the other thing. But if it's being processed, they're doing something to it so that it will last longer on the shelf. In which case, too much of that is going to offset. It's going to unbalance your body. It's going to make you not feel great. You're going to always want lots of water, of course. I'm going to always say that because that's what keeps our body flowing and the blood flowing. It keeps you regular. If you're nursing, it's going to keep your milk flowing. It's basically the key to everything. And then I say avoid anything that's going to crash your system. So sugar and caffeine, these are things that if you have it, you'll feel really good. And then you might eventually have a sugar crash or a caffeine crash, right? So now you're sluggish again. And if you are postpartum and your hormones are trying to rebalance and you're trying to transition and adjust to having this baby, and maybe it's really hard because your baby's colicky, and so that's why you're drinking caffeine, that crash is going to make all of that feel even worse. And if that crash is happening on a regular basis, you're going to start thinking that it's something wrong with you when really it's just what you're putting in is offsetting your body. So avoiding things that are going to like pump you up really fast so you can get through this moment or this day or whatever, but then it makes you come down really hard is going to make that transition even harder. And then cravings. So when I was pregnant with my second baby, before I realized I had preeclampsia, actually, I should back up. When I was pregnant with my first baby, I was craving. My mother was a vegetarian growing up, and my father was not. And I went back and forth. So I grew up on basically like a flexitarian diet. Like I would eat meat when I wanted it. My mom wouldn't cook it for me because it grossed her out. But I still ate meat, but I also had a very heavy plant-based diet. So when I got pregnant, I was craving tons and tons of fruits and vegetables and vegetarian foods. When I got pregnant with my second child, it was really interesting because I was craving a lot of berries and a lot of red meat, which I just chalked it up to, oh, every pregnancy is different. Then I found out about all the complications and things I was having, and it turns out that me craving red meat was because I was anemic and my body was telling me what I needed to put into it in order to fix those cravings. And then when I got pregnant with my last one, it went back down to craving fruits and vegetables. And actually I was craving a lot of vitamin C. And a lot of that was undoing the trauma that was still in my body from the second pregnancy. It was undoing a lot of the things that were still in there. And so sometimes when you're having cravings, and this goes for anybody, not even just a pregnant person, the cravings are telling you exactly what your body needs so that it can function properly. And there's a chart, and I meant to get it, but it'll say like, if you're craving, this sugary thing, it means that you need this thing. That's something you can look up so that you can start to kind of identify what you're craving. But what I have found is that if you're just eating a balanced diet and eating a variety of things, you don't have those same cravings. It doesn't mean that suddenly you're not going to want ice cream or whatever. It just means that you're not like, oh, I really, really, really want this sweet thing, or I really, really want this soda, or I really, really want this whatever, because your body is getting all the things that it actually needs. So then how does community function in all of this? So in specific regards to food, your community should be providing a postpartum parent, either yourself or somebody you're caring for, they can be either grocery shopping for this new parent so that they don't have to do it. They could be bringing prepared meals or having food delivered or having groceries delivered, but making sure that this parent has access to the foods that they need in order to recover and to provide for their baby if they're nursing. The other job is to make sure that they're doing all the other things just to make it easier for this new parent, right? They're changing diapers, they're cleaning up, they're watering plants, they're playing with siblings. They can be making teas or baths for this parent to just like relax. Another thing is, if a parent is having a hard time, having somebody there to just hold and care for the baby when they're not feeding or when they're feeling overwhelmed or when they're tired is going to go a very, very long way. And there's a whole other tons of things that you can do to support somebody who just had a baby. And when I am working with a new family or a new person, well, it's a new family if they're pregnant. One of the main things I do is I work on a postpartum plan. I discuss who's going to be allowed to come when they're in labor, who's allowed to be there when they're postpartum, who's allowed to come when they're in recovery, how long are they going to stay home, what kind of things do they want or not want. I've had parents who were like, I don't want people coming unless they've had their vaccines or their boosters or whatever. Or they say, I don't want I don't want people coming who have been vaccinated, right? These are the things that you need to discuss and plan out, because knowing the plan going into that postpartum period and knowing and putting everybody on the same page is going to make that transition easier. And a lot of the times what makes it so hard is because we focus so much on that pregnancy and that delivery, and then we just send these new parents home with no help, and we say, okay, well, you're fine now, I'll see you in 6 weeks. And then after 6 weeks, then nobody's checking on them again. And there's no plan. And then it becomes overwhelming because they're not sleeping as much, or things, the baby is colicky or whatever is going on. It's just a hard transition regardless. And so having that plan in place beforehand is going to ease that transition. And then they don't have to worry about what's getting done and what's not getting done, because everybody has already worked out a plan. And that community can be a partner, right? It can be their spouse, it can be their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. It can just be friends, it can be parents. If they have older kids, the kids are part of the community, and they should know that they get to help and support a new parent and a new baby come to the family and welcome them, and make that transition easier. So how do we access these foods? So in Arizona, I feel like we're pretty lucky. We have a lot of access to a lot of things. Here in Tucson, we have farmers markets. And if you have EBT, farmers markets will double your EBT. So for instance, for every $1, they'll give you $2. So if something costs $5, it would be $2.50 off of your EBT card, if that makes sense what I'm saying. And that allows people who are lower income access to pretty much all of the food is organic, but because of the guidelines, we're not allowed to say it's organic, but most people are growing their food without pesticides. So it's allowing you access to food that is pesticide free, and it's grown locally. And in my case, and I'm sure it's the case for most people, when I go to a farmer's market, my stuff is being harvested literally right before we go set up. We go to our garden, and then we harvest what we need for the farmer's market, and that's what's going. So it's within hours, which means it's going to be packed with those nutrients. It's going to be harvested when it's actually ripe or ready to be harvested, versus picked early and then having to ripen, and then it's not quite right. Right. Like that's why some foods don't taste so good at the grocery store, not because of, how they're growing it, but just because we have to pick it sooner in order to transport it. If you are a WIC recipient, they do these things. They're called Farmers Market Nutrition Program coupons. And they give you $30 of free money basically to use at the farmers market. And when it's available, they even double that. So it'll be $60. So you can check your area. And those are usually based off of like a grant, I believe is what it is. And so it's first come, first serve. So whoever gets there first, if it's gone, it's gone. But a lot of people don't know about it. So even still, I know our farmers market, I think they still have some here in Tucson. And then also it depends on when the farmers market starts. So if one starts in March, but one starts in May, the one that starts in May will still have those coupons. In Arizona, I've seen a lot of community gardens, and a lot of times they're free. The one that we garden at, they are part of the food bank. So they have the free plots, which is where we started out. And they give you the seedlings. So you don't even have to provide any seeds or anything. Basically, you put it in the ground. They have it on an irrigation system, and then you come and get the food when it's ready. And that's a free opportunity to grow your own food. And I have found that children really enjoy that process. And it also opens them up to trying a lot more new foods because they've seen it. I've been at the garden, and when my toddler was very small, like just sitting up and just starting solid foods, she would take like kale or spinach or whatever, and she would just chew on the leaves while we were working in the garden. And then when we had cauliflower, you know, she would see us tasting it or whatever, and then she wanted to taste it. Or when we bring stuff home, she's excited to watch us cook with it. So gardening is a really great way to help access good food and also create good eating habits for your children. If you're not able to do those things, you can always get delivery via like Instacart, Amazon. They will do EBT. Amazon offers EBT. So if you are in a food desert, I lived in a place that was very small. It's not a town, it's called an area. And in that area, they only had 2 gas stations and a very, very, very small grocery store. It wasn't even really a grocery store. There wasn't really any fresh produce or anything like that. And so our ability to access good food there was limited. Luckily, we had a car so we could drive, but that's not the case for a lot of people. But if you use Amazon, even though, you know, everybody has their feelings about Amazon, there is a way to access a variety of different foods with Amazon. And also because they're partnered with, they own Whole Foods, you can also get food from Whole Foods, and they deliver as well. Something else to consider, I haven't really tried, but I've heard good things, is meal kits, right? If you really can't get to things, maybe you can get food delivered. And again, that is a privilege thing. If you're on low income, I don't think they take EBT. So that's not going to work for you. But if you have the means, that's something to consider, because then you have all the instructions, all the ingredients right there, and those can be catered based on diet. The support community, right? So somebody who is helping you, they can be going to get the food or bringing the food or growing the food or whatever. A lot of the dollar stores will have, surprisingly, they'll have like organic produce sometimes. That is something to look at, like going into those dollar stores and seeing what is available. And then if you do have access to being able to grow, even if it's just in pots, in Arizona and across the country, a lot of public libraries have seeds for free. And that's where we get the majority of our seeds, excluding specific ancestral, like the African seeds, is we get them from our libraries. And you do not need to be like a Phoenix or Tucson resident in order to get a library card, in order to get those seeds. You just have to be, I don't even think you have to be in the state. You just have to go and get a library card. And I think it just limits what kind of access you have to books. Like, so instead of 50, you can only take like 5, but you can get the seeds and things like that from the library. There was something else, but I forgot. Oh, well. And then, so here are some of the sources. So if you are not great with coming up with your own recipes, or maybe you're trying to try new foods and things like that, these 2 cookbooks are good. And you can go to libraries and get these. I got the Eat to Feed one from the library when I first had my baby, because I wanted to see it, and I really enjoyed it. And then the first 40 days is really good, because that goes back to taking care of new parents for those 6 weeks. And then the person I think I learned the most about food and postpartum care is the Postpartum Healing Lodge. She's the one always saying, her name is Rayanne, right? I think that's how, yeah, Rayanne. And she is Native and Mexican, and she shares a lot of, she has a whole little cookbook. She has classes and all kinds of stuff. She's really lovely. And then Oat Mama is a local business, and they have postpartum and prenatal teas and lactation bars. I will say this, I tried one of their lactation bars one day. It was a couple months into my about 3 months postpartum, and I immediately not immediately, but I shortly after started, like, my milk came in very quickly and I was leaking. So I definitely recommend their lactation bars. And then if you have any more questions or want to know how to get a hold of me, this is my contact information. yeah, that's that.
Wow. I just want to sit at your feet and listen to you talk for a little bit longer. You got me so excited. And as a postpartum doula, these are things that I don't think is covered enough when you do your initial training. So thank you for reminding us that we as a community can do this for our moms. That's really amazing. Okay, just a word to our audience. We're going to go off of Facebook now and go into Zoom. If you'd like to join our Zoom group for the next couple minutes, go to fourthtrimester.org/villages and get the Zoom link. Otherwise, we will see you in a month. At the end of June, we have a physical therapist talking about pelvic health. Okay.